our partners who are real. You were not going to let me get through that with a straight face, were you? To share in the costs associated with accessing their facilities for intermodal movement. We look for outcomes with that one in which we would see a reduction in delays because of improvements to incident management, that we would reduce the delays to the goods movement community, and we would see better use of the capacity within our existing system. Questions on that one? I appreciate your patience because this was a very long going through, but at least you see what the outcome was of the workshop, and that we'll be using these to go out to the public in terms of getting public input. The next steps in the process will be after we take it out to your fellow elected officials, subject matter experts in our various roundtables. We will provide that results to the Plan Advisory Committee. We will update the investment strategies based on their input, and they will provide a recommendation to this body of a preferred strategy so that we will then be able to tie that to the financial plan and be able to come up with a draft plan for your consideration based on the available dollars and the direction in which you want to see dollars spent. I would again encourage you to stay tuned and stay engaged. Our intention is that this will be your document, not the WAMPO staff's, and so that as we go through this, your input is crucial. You'll own it. It'll be yours. You can't say they did it to us. Our job is to take your direction and translate it from a technical standpoint, but you own it, ladies and gentlemen. Any final questions for me?
Just one question, as I read through this a little bit before I got here, just listening to you. It goes back to kind of the small community and how we can use this. The goal statements that you put up, I would assume going forward that any project submitted would have to point to one of those goal statements, or it's going to be out of context. So I'm just, again, wondering as I go through this, and, shame on me for not being more involved in the process and having more small community, language in this, but again, this all points to more major, nothing wrong with it, but more major type necessary actions. And I'm just wondering if, a new project would have to tie to one or more of these goal statements to even get consideration.
It's reasonable to expect that that would be the case. One of the things that we will be bringing back to this group are the performance measures that we will use to describe what success is, as well as the project screening criteria. Small communities will still have opportunities in a whole host of areas. If you think about safety, there's an area where small communities can make an investment. When you look at this question of bottlenecks and reducing the delays, small communities, again, are going to be able to identify locations that have regional significance. There are a number of the smaller communities and rural components of this region that have significant impacts in terms of international as well as national products that they are delivering. Those become important when we look at some of the criteria here. So it is not without opportunities for all of the communities in this area. And to be perfectly honest, one of the challenges that this group is going to have when we say, here's a set of projects, is you're going to have to decide if it has the appropriate balance between the counties, the large cities, and the smaller communities within this metropolitan area. And that's going to be your call. As you look at the group of projects that have gone through the technical screening, you're going to look at those projects and go, it's not quite the balance we want, or yeah, that's the balance we want. So your battle isn't going to be is first make sure you submit, but then secondly, how do you convince your fellow decision makers that sit around this table that they need to care about that small community perspective in the set of projects that get selected?
I think that's appropriate. Also, you have to know that there's going to be pathway projects and things like that, and all small cities are looking at those kind of projects too. That'll figure in as we go through the PAC project advisory groups criteria for picking things and getting it into the tip. That's all going to be important too. So you need to think of a breadth of projects It might be a bridge, it could be a pathway. So, the other thing is, I've always said, if you're not at the table, you might be on the menu. So that it's good that the small cities are here that can advocate and pull together and say, hey, we've got projects that are meaningful. So I think it's gonna be a continuing dialogue. So, okay, anything else for Gloria? Thank you, Gloria. I know that's arduous to go through, but we appreciate it. Okay, there's no more agenda items. Anything else that we need to talk, Tom?
I was going to go ahead and add, and what Commissioner Peter John brought up. About a year and a half ago, we exceeded all the current parameters for EPA in this area. Our 3-year average exceeded the EPA guidelines of the current guidelines. And a letter was written by the Wichita City Manager to the EPA asking for forgiveness, and he gave him some plans, I think, on things that we were looking at doing in this area. We haven't heard any more since. But we have potential to be out of attainment right now, just based on the 3-year running average and having exceeded those. I don't know where we're at on it, and maybe John knows, I don't know.
Well, based on what happened last summer, the numbers didn't really improve a whole lot for this. What we have to do is hope for a really cool, rainy summer so that we don't have the exceedances that we've been experiencing whenever we have hot, dry weather. I think what we can do is we can actually give you the numbers when we come back with the presentation, and that'll help you better understand what's going on.
I remember seeing a national map that basically showed the areas that were in attainment, and with the new federal standards, basically just about every place that was in attainment went out of attainment, which I think was one of the reasons the feds kind of pulled back from that. And if the functional problem of pollution is the fact that we may have too many hot summer days in the summer, I think that's a question of, we need to go back and look at what we're really measuring and what we're really trying to achieve. If we're getting background radiation, background levels created by the sun for our low-level ozone problem, and that was at that time that was presented. That was the problem. That gets into a broader policy issue, and that may be what's going on in Washington. And but it's something we need to stay on top of, because if there's dramatic, expensive compliance measures that are going to be mandated, if we are out of compliance and we are in non-attainment, we need to try and prepare the community as much as we can, as well as trying to say, hey, if we end up with X number of days that are over 100 degrees, we're more likely to have a worse summer than we had last year. I mean, I don't know how meaningful that is in terms of what we can do in terms of trying to, the whole question of air quality.
Well, the problem is we're out of compliance even under the existing standard, let alone some of the proposed changes that are being kicked around in Washington.
The standards were tightened up, about 4 or 5 years ago, and then they talked about tightening them up a second time. And so if we go back to the standards, but if you'd let me put together the criteria on how we measure them, as opposed to the very short periods and very low concentrations over a short period of time, actually come up with a tighter standard. If you'd allow the measures to be, allow them to be more than the short periods than the federal rules currently have. So it's a really interesting political scientific question in terms of how we, whether we're in attainment or out of attainment. But if we're going to be expected to do some fairly expensive things to try and improve if we are out of attainment, then I think it's important to try and get that information out there and try and give people as much time to prepare in advance as possible. So, if we are, like was said, out of attainment, something we need to understand what that's going to mean in the long run, because my constituents hate surprises of a negative sort.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thanks for the help with this. Talk to you.